You're happy with how it was presented, everything?
Yeah, mostly. No, it's great. I think if we had more time, I would have asked for a bigger plinth.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, but it's like that.
Is this how it's been laid out in other spaces, like specifically where the posters are versus where the slides?
Not really. Actually, it depends on the space.
Yeah.
So yeah, like that, it was better because you have this big space. When you enter, you just have the cardboard, the books,
Yeah.
and then you have just the picture. And then when you go around, you have the bench. And I think it's built a great space with the two posters.
Yeah. So when you have these in the boxes, is that part of it, that there are boxes there? Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah.
Because it's not often that you see it presented, like notes or whatever, presented in that way.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like usually they're like on a table, it's like at the front, it's very carefully placed. But it's also interesting to see how people react to that. Like, is this something that I take? Like, is it?
Yeah,
like
you're right, because people, they don't want to take it because they think like it's really a stack and like it's not supposed to be taken. Like,
I also thought that maybe they were thinking that because they hadn't been put out yet, like they were still like off limits. Like no one had like put them on the table. Like they weren't in a space that makes sense to take.
Yeah. But no, I guess some people got it. And took some.
I just took one.
Yeah.
It means that I don't have any morals. Like I'm just like, oh sure, whatever.
That's great. It's like a way of testing your limits.
So how did you come to the project? Like how did the whole concept come to you?
Actually, when I started to talk with Sarah Maldoror, so the director of Sambizanga, the poster is So I met her in 2009 because I wanted to see one of her movies about Guyanese poets called Léon Gontran Damas, and who was part of the Negritude movement. And she's one of the only director who did a movie about Léon Gontran Damas. So I met her and we started to discuss. And finally, she told me about all her experiences in Algeria and in Guinea-Bissau and in Angola and in Mozambique. And then I did a lot of interview with her, and finally we came to this movie, Guns for Banta. And she started to tell me this movie that was shot in the 70s in the Bijagos Islands, which is a part of Guinea-Bissau, and she told me, okay, but this film doesn't exist anymore. That's the Algerian who has it. And I was like, okay, but we have to find the footage. That was the first project: find the footage and do a real editing of this movie. But I tried several things and I couldn't find the footage. But I found this photograph. And that's pretty much how I came with this idea of doing the slideshow.
Is the footage believed to exist and just can't be found, or is it believed to have been destroyed?
For me, they are destroyed.
Yeah.
The footage has been destroyed because there was storage. There was a storage in the Algerian Cinémathèque, and there was a flood.
Oh, okay.
So they got rid of all this footage that were in the Cinémathèque.
So it wouldn't have been the government destroying it upon seizing it?
That's people. Some people told me that the government used to burn the reels, but I don't believe that. I think it's more like there have been years and years of I don't know, like nobody was running the Cinémathèque anymore. So I think they just got rid of it.
Yeah.
Like it's not even the government. It's just like, there was nobody there. So.
What is it about being told that it doesn't exist that draws you in? Because you also have that ring in was it Italian movie that doesn't exist? Like there's an absence. Was it an ancestral ring that you?
Yeah, I destroyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's it was a ring belonging to my great-grandfather, and it was a kind of he was a Freemason.
Yeah.
And in French Guiana, the Freemasons, they are the real political power, and they were really close to the colonial power. So for me, it was a way to ask a question. Okay, I have this ring. It's a kind of legacy. What can I do with it? how can I transmit this thing? So I decided to melt it, but to have the shape of the skull inside the ring. It's like a counter form, I don't know. There is, and
that makes sense, yeah.
And so it was a way to deal with this legacy and to say, okay, maybe if I'm going to sell this ring, you know, it's like just the shadow of the former one. And
well, it operates in a similar way where when you're observing it, there's something that's missing that's in kind of the centerpiece of the exhibition, like something that's no longer there for whichever reason.
Yeah.
And that was interesting here. And you have a Serge Dany quote about you know replacing an image or putting something that stands in for something else. And I was wondering what this general concept means to you, to have something that is missing or gone or no longer there, but still being represented in some way.
Actually, it comes with the type of images of Sarah Maldoror, because when I started to work on, let's say, French colonial history, you know that there are a lot of images that were used by the French Empire, you know, to describe the other. And you know also that where at the same time there were a lot of images produced by the other of themselves. And that's pretty much what the Sarah Maldoror's movie are about, all her movies. So I was like, okay, I need to fill this gap. I need to do it because there are some picture images that needs to be reloaded. I don't know if it makes sense, but it's like some needs to be like discharged, like, okay, we have to get rid of them, and some needs to be reloaded. And Sarah Maldoror's movie and our pictures, we need to see them. So it's like for the text, you know, it's like the work is just having the text and like making the text available again. And that's it.
On the last reel, though, there's an image, and the narration says that it's not going to be shown, like it can't be shown, it's the death of the heroine. But there is still an image, like there are other parts where there's no image, but there still is an image that accompanies that. And that's one thing that I was curious about.
Yeah, actually it's a way to disconnect completely.
Okay.
And that's something I wanted to try, you know, with the voices. It's to, at some point, to try to connect with the picture in a very didactic way, and sometimes to be off, and just to try and to see what it produces on the viewer, actually. And that was So at this time, you can expect or a black frame or like a dead body.
Yeah.
And I wanted to propose something else, which is Sarah Maldoror's face. And that was something that was like, it's her dream, you know, of the martyr, these kind of things.
And it's interesting that there's a kind of dissolve that happens to like the montage, because when you expect a slideshow, you don't expect that. Meanwhile, this is not a film, but it kind of has properties of filmmaking, where one image kind of dissolves into another.
Yeah.
And I was curious why you chose to pursue that technique for something that, you know, as you say, is not film. Like it can't.
Yeah, I wanted to have this moment where these two pictures are becoming a third one.
Yeah.
And so that's
the dialectic too,
yeah, exactly. So suddenly, like it's you have this moment where they are kind of converging, and I really, that's the images I wanted to have. And but there are some moments where it's just cut.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's very fast, and we are really following the voice, and it's a really didactic voice. And so I wanted to try this different type of editing, because for me it's really an editing. I did it like if I had real footage and I was dealing with movement, and so that's a reason for the long fade. And
at the end.
Does it make sense?
Yeah. No, the ending especially, because you wouldn't necessarily expect that, because it's also taking into account the projector, right? Because what is like a fade to white or a fade to black in film we understand, but in like a projected slide, the ending where it goes from I guess you would say a white to a black, but it's really just the wall, which is also white.
Yeah.
It seems like there's a real emphasis on the machinery as well.
Yeah.
What role did that play in it for you?
It's maybe a dumb idea, but the emphasis is on the guns. And for me, loading a picture, it's like loading a bullet.
Yeah, the chamber. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the reason why I really wanted to have slide projector, to have this sound, clack, clack. And because it's really an homage to the third cinema.
Oh, yeah.
And a picture, it was a weapon. So that's my way to deal with this kind of legacy. It's like, okay, I want slides because I want this sound. And I think it adds something.
Yeah.
And but
it's interesting that you also use the term reload as far as like the images, because now they're being projected now, or our relationship to the filmmakers of that period that made these kind of revolutionary films.
Yeah.
Their careers kind of taper off a bit, right? Like they're not as potent throughout the rest of their career, and I'm wondering what that says about the images. Like, can they be reloaded? Like, is now a time where if they're reprojected, there will be this kind of call to action?
Of course not. They can't be that. And actually, the thing is, like, we have learned to be really suspicious with this type of images. And I think that's what also I'm trying to do with all this narration, is like to say, okay, we have these pictures of these children with weapons and children. We have these images of children with guns. But during this period, they really needed the women and they needed the children to fight against colonialism. But in the 80s, it was the same picture that we grew up with, but it wasn't for a fight for freedom. It was just like chaos. And for me, these images, they can be like a new kind of colonial imagery. And I don't know. I think they are not a call to arm. They are, for us, they are more like a problem. I might say.
Is there? Well,
it's like how to deal with that, and that's the reason why I chose sometimes to be didactic, because to put back the context. For me, it's perhaps a way to avoid the problem, but it's not. It's like trying to find ways to use that.
But it is bringing Sarah back into a kind of, at least in the art world, a kind of awareness. People are aware of the work again. So
yeah, that was one of the points. To use at the beginning, that was one of the points. It was to use the production, the economical power that you have in the art world to digitalize the film, or to bring to screen a film, and to say, okay, we have this money in the art world and the cinema world is not interested in Saha anymore. So what can we do to put her back in the cinema world where she belongs? And that's exactly the same that the text. It's like, okay, what kind of production we can use to make this thing available. And it's great because Pablo, he found a copy of the Sambizanga for the Flaherty seminars, and now you can find Sambizanga on YouTube.
Yeah, I saw.
And for me, that's great, perfect. Like, okay, people can see it finally, and so that it's like.
Is that the posters are interesting as well, because maybe like that's a way people engage with past cinema now, is through like design or look towards something like that.
Yeah.
Is that something that played into the decision to use those, or?
Yeah, and also because they were kind of with all the detail of the posters, because it's the only poster that was made for this movie.
And it was from
Romania.
Yeah.
So for me, that's what's interesting. It's suddenly you have this French production, but you have a Romanian poster, and it's a way to connect all this struggle in Portuguese-speaking Africa, to what was happening in the USSR and all the, the East Bloc, let's say. Because something that people don't realize, that there was this kind of thing, the Cold War. But in Africa, the Cold War, it was like the Second World War, World War II. It was that intense and that chaotic and that, it was really a slaughter there between the Angolese and the Cuban and the South African. It was really, there was a war. And so that's a way to just, if you read the poster, you can see, okay, that's weird.
If the film had been made, how do you think it would have been received, knowing how the previous works had been? Like, they had received, like the shorts had some festival run, like they had played places. Is this something that you think would have had a legacy? Maybe something like Battle of Algiers does, because she worked on that as well.
Yeah, she was the first assistant of Pontecorvo. I don't think so. I think knowing how the film was made, I think it would have been like a propaganda movie anyway. Even if she wanted to do something else, I think it would have been this type of movie, like they were doing in Algeria or in Mozambique. I think a great movie, but with its own limits, which is to serve a purpose. And that's the reason why Sambizanga is so interesting, because you have the presence of this woman in the film, which is telling us something else. And, even if I think it's not really a feminist movie, but that's something else.
How does now with your exhibition next to Africa Audio, how do you think that these two source texts that you're dealing with in both, how do they match up in your own oeuvre, I guess you could say? Like, you've got these source texts that are films that are potentially problematic for different ways about representation. To choose two of them side by side, basically, how does one work inform the other? Is this something you've considered? Yeah,
sure. Actually, I came to Africa Audio because of the manifesto toward third cinema, and they are quoting, and they are just quoting this. There's a whole paragraph about Africa Audio, and when I came by this paragraph, I was like, okay, this is the type of cinema they are fighting against, and I wanted to analyze it and to see it and to just know what was this film. And the story of Africa Audio is just really amazing and really something that we have to deal with, because Gualtiero Giacobetti and Franco Prosperi, they staged an execution for Africa Audio. I was like, okay, so what type of cinema is it? What are we doing with this thing? And what is really interesting is this particular movie in Berlin. It kind of created the anti-racist movement. So it was a bad film who had some really tremendous effects. Like really it was a performative film, and. So in a way, Africa Audio, it's against third cinema, but at the same time, it produced exactly what third cinema expected from a good movie. So I like this kind of, okay, you are not doing the good object, but you have good results. And so, yeah, I don't know.
What about your place in relation to in both works? Because there's kind of a personal narrative in that one with the photos and the ring that you've got that kind of relate to it. In this one, it seems more like you're like the interlocutor that's having the conversations or at least conversations that are prompting the responses that form the narrative, and you're also editing specifically. How has that shifted in the two pieces, your place within the work?
I don't know. This I don't know. Actually, I think the slideshow is really personal. Because I'm really speaking also about the death of my father. And it's every time I'm trying to find this kind of little story, not because I want to tell a personal story, it's just to say, okay, there are many people who were like my father, who were tortured in the jails, and so that's pretty much what I want to produce, because I show this work in Portugal, and a lot of people came to tell me after, I was too in Porto, and so it's just the personal story is just a way to find a way to enter a collective memory. I guess it's the same with the ring, to destroy this kind of personal, heritage, and it's a way to enter it. I don't know, something like that.
Well, you say collective memory, but isn't there also the flip side, which is a kind of collective amnesia, like this kind of refusal to remember or to try to not think about difficult things like that?
But yeah, definitely it exists. I don't know for you guys here how you deal with this kind of stories, but it seems like you are pretty much in this state of amnesia, no?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know, from what I heard, it's so it's like, the French with the Algerian war. During years, like, it was just forbidden. And now it's growing and growing because we have there's a problem in the society, so we have to deal with these issues. But that's the way. I don't know. Everybody is doing, is part of the job. So there are scholars, artists, and it's a way to break this kind of silence and this kind of amnesia.
Well, it's interesting how this one unfolds over the different media, like the narrative that's going on, the images that you're seeing that are photographs, like production photographs, basically, and but specifically the what you could call the pamphlet or the liner notes, even, because it's the one thing that there's a specific, you're more aware of reading it now versus when it was written, I think, because that there's all this optimism, or there's this feeling that this is going to be something that doesn't exist. And I'm wondering, when you were conceiving it, did you have different maybe temporal lines for the different media that was being used?
Yeah, that's exactly that. For me, it's the different temporality. So, because I know that people, they are not going to read that, in a gallery space.
I tried to.
Really?
It's interesting because you have the different narratives that are blurring on the audio, and if you're reading something, you're adding another line to it that has a kind of overwhelming feeling to it.
Actually, I like that you try that, because what the thing I really wanted is just, you see the photograph in the book, and you see the photograph in the slideshow, and you have this map, and they are speaking about places, and you're like, okay, there, this kind of, it's small thing, but I think it adds to the screen. But at the same time, you have different, the posters, it's really fast. You see it, it's like, okay, it's finished. The slideshow, you have to, deal with the voices, deal with the picture, deal with the editing. And so every time, I'm trying to, have different temporality in a show, different way to be in front of the work. To, I don't know, perhaps people that like posters, they will just like the posters, and and it's already something.
Well, they have a temporality too, because I was looking at them trying to determine how time had impacted them in what ways, or how they were so well preserved. What was the provenance? How did they stay so well preserved?
I really don't know.
How did you come across them?
I saw one of the internet.
Okay, yeah.
Because I saw a picture of this poster, and I was like, what? There's a poster of Sambizanga? And I came across the mail of this guy who had thousands of posters, and he told me, okay, I only have 4 posters of this, and so I ordered them. That's it. And I didn't ask. Should have.
Has the research, you mentioned how researching from one project has led to a kernel that leads to something else. Has this research you've done started to already transition into another piece that you're working on?
There's another work called Ça va en continu. and it was produced in Portugal with Portuguese actors and for a show in 2012. And actually it was a way to unfold all the problems I encountered when I was showing the slideshow. Because there is this big problem. I'm a white male telling the story of a black director, and so I had really a lot of problem with this thing, of this idea of ownership of the voice. So I did a kind of a short movie about all these kind of problems of who is able to tell a story, this kind of story, and who is able to. It's like doing this slideshow. It can be understood as a cultural consumption, and that's what I wanted to analyze in Ça va on continue, which means it's okay, we go on.
Yeah.
So this idea of by staging all this thing, we are kind of sometimes reproducing, this kind of colonial use of the other, the image of the other. So and every time it's like I'm trying to see, okay, I have all these problems on my table, what can I do with them?
Is that why you called it a film? Like, is it meant to be shown where you're seated and you're just watching it, or is it something that's projected in a gallery where people can come in and out?
I prefer when people see it, but
because that's what I was thinking. Is you say like I could see something like this where if you don't watch the entire thing, you could just go in and consume the images and then leave.
Yeah. That's
But in it's still interesting how cinema people do feel like, oh, I sit down. Yeah. It's starting, and I sit until it.
Yeah, we come back to this temporality. If you just catch a picture of a woman with naked breasts, you can say, oh, this guy, is fucked up. But at the same time, I'm trying to address, I'm showing this picture, but the voice is saying, okay, this is perhaps colonial pornography. And so you have to be aware of that. That you are perhaps confronting the same, you are perhaps watching the same type of thing, even if it's in the framing of a militant movie. Even in this kind of big framing, you still have, this tendency to reproduce, this kind of imagery.
That Sarah would have felt this as well, because she was criticized, wasn't she, for again speaking for others in some respects?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. But I don't know. The text at the end of the fourth text is really trying to explain that the people that didn't want to be involved in the shooting of the movie.
Yeah, and the costumes that they were wearing.
Yeah. And so for me that's really interesting. Like, okay, they don't care. They don't care of doing militant cinema. It's like, okay, we don't want to be involved in the revolutionary process, and we don't want to be involved in your cinema. We don't know what this is all about. And I like that, because you are stuck with the people, and with their will. And I don't know, it's because I read a lot Frantz Fanon, and
which is pretty militant.
Yeah, definitely. And all the difficulty in Frantz Fanon text, The Rage of Earth, is how can you relate to the people? How can you deal with this blurry idea? What is the people? How can we define it? And I like this when in a text the people it doesn't want to do cinema.
And they've performed for something that doesn't exist, so it's strange that performance that they didn't want to do isn't even really immortalized. It's just an experience that they had.
Yeah, it's a reenactment of something that never happened.
Yeah.
Or never happened in this way, in this territory. All this kind of thing that when you are trying to do that's the reason why I think it would have been a propaganda movie. It's like, okay, you are pushing a little bit too far, perhaps, to have this kind of picture, because you know that the international media needs to be aware of what was going on in Portuguese-speaking Africa, because they were throwing napalm, like in Vietnam, and nobody knew that at the time.
And then it didn't get made because it wasn't propaganda enough. That's
this thing.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay, thanks.